Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, the next question is from the Glasgow and Renfrew Unite Community Youth Work and Not-for-Profit branch. And if you thought that was long, wait to hear the question. What have the candidates to say about the analysis of the Tory, Labour, Lib Dem and SNP election manifestos published by the Institute for Fiscal Studies last week, according to which all four parties, that's Labour, Tory, Lib Dem and Nationalist, are committed to pro-austerity policies, and B, all four parties are hiding the cuts which they intend making?
Chair, can I suggest, in order to get two questions, that the speakers are allocated 2 minutes to answer questions. We'll never get through all the questions. Okay. 2 minutes.
I'll do your question next.
They made a statement in 3 minutes.
Okay.
So I think 2 minutes to answer.
Okay, are folk happy with that? Fair enough. Okay. Let me know what's that one. Okay, George.
We are actually the only party who told the truth to the British people. In 2010 we were very clear that difficult decisions were ahead of us. We didn't shy away from the cuts. We had to take very difficult decisions, and I'm proud of how much we have turned out the economy in a very short period of time. 2 million more people are in jobs now than at the time. 2 million jobs were created. That's equivalent to 1,000 jobs each and every day across Britain, and 100 of those are in Scotland each and every day over the past 5 years. So we didn't hide the cuts. We have been actually upfront. We have been honest and truthful with the British people that there have to be very difficult decisions. I worked with governments around the world during my business, and I worked with countries like Greece, Portugal and Spain, and I saw how when governments lose control of their finances, the IMF intervenes and imposes severe abrupt cuts to the health services, education and other public services, affecting the most vulnerable people in these societies. So thanks to the difficult decisions made by this Conservative-led government, such dramatic measures as experienced by these countries were not needed in Britain. And we just need 5 more years to continue the job and balance the books. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Well, I will provide with a briefing to that organisation. It shows that the IFA's report, both on its analysis of the SNP plans, but also the Labour plans, are actually flawed and inaccurate. And in terms of the SNP plans, it underestimates borrowing and revenue. It also does not take into account revenue for tax avoidance. So there is clear flaws in the IFA's assessments of both SNP and the Labour plans. And other experts are suggesting that Nicola Sturgeon is correct when she says that austerity has held back growth, it has lowered living standards, and it has increased poverty. And I believe the reason for that is, as I said earlier, the STUC analysis is that 70 pence in every pound of public money ends up in the private sector economy, whether that's through grants, contracts, wages and the like. And so the IFS are wrong.
Well, the IFS are incorrect in some matters of detail. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I mean, I think they are absolutely right in saying that there's not actually all that much difference between the different parties' proposals on austerity. I mean, I think that the reality is that the SNP proposal would start less deep but would last much longer, and in fact Labour's austerity would be much a shorter period. However, I think the balance, the question is, where would the cuts fall under a Labour government? And we've made it absolutely clear that we want to try and address debt the same way as everybody else wants to address debt, but we would want to address debt in the way that I indicated, in terms of making sure that we take more money off those who are wealthier. Now, there are some areas where we are going to make cuts. I think that there should be, and the party thinks that there should be, quite a considerable amount of cuts in those income-related benefits where the government is subsidising low-paying employers. An increase in the national minimum wage would clearly result in a cut in public spending on subsidising those employers. And I don't think there's anybody here that would oppose what I think there is a sensible cut in public expenditure. Labour is going to make sure that the broadest shoulders carry the biggest burden. And I'll now pass over.
Thank you, Dan.
First of all, I think that the claims by the Tory representative of the coalition with the Liberals, the Lib Dems rather, saying that they've rescued the economy is economically illiterate. Because when it comes to this claim of the wonderful job creation, what kind of jobs? The TUC analysis shows that only 1 out of 40 is a full-time permanent job. 32% of it, incredibly, are self-employed. And now, a recent survey, 80% of the self-employed are living under the breadline. So it's nonsense. Austerity has caused further poverty and misery for the country, or at least for the majority population in it. And addressing debt, which seems to be the common theme of all the mainstream parties, frankly is not addressing the real issue. I think what needs to be addressed is the redistribution of wealth. Because right now we've got an incredible dislocation of that. Labour says they're going to carry out, or did say in the past, 90% of the coalition's cuts. And I would judge it not so much by the IFS as real experience in the recent years, where unfortunately what we've had is that Westminster issues and dictates cuts. The Holyrood government, rather than defy that, have devolved it, and then councils have carried it out in some cases, like in this city, as almost demented zealots, carrying out such cuts against jobs and services. So we'd argue for certainly cutting spending on Trident by scrapping it. We'd argue for the same point as Ian about jacking up the minimum wage to remove the subsidy to low pay to big business. And we'd also argue that, for example, expansion of jobs would increase the tax revenue for the government.
Let's just remember what it was like when those banks collapsed, the queues outside the banks, the possible runs on money, all the savings that people had saved up in the bank, not knowing if it was just going to be blown away overnight. We had to do something to rescue the economy, and I think the economy is now growing at 2.4%. Okay? Now, I'm not going to apologise for the excellent growth that we made in the economy, but I know things have been tough. The employment is now, unemployment is now at its lowest since 2008. Employment is up. The wages and the contracts of the jobs, I haven't seen this as an analysis, I'd be interested to see it. I don't necessarily accept a lot of it, but I'm interested to see it in detail. The labour wages hasn't been good enough and it has to grow. I disagree with my socialist and communist colleagues. I know that they have very strong principled cases, but I just think they're wrong. For every year, every moment that our budget is in deficit, we are vulnerable to another global recession affecting us. I think that we need to quickly but calmly get the deficit under control. We need to balance the books so that we are safe for the future. This global recession could happen again. It could happen as a national recession, or it could happen as a global one. You've seen what's happening in Greece and other European countries. We have to get this under control. It would be very popular and very easy for me to say that we're just going to abandon it all, pursue another route. Alerts to the left, more alerts to the right with the Tories for ideological reasons. I am not saying that, and I know it's not popular, but I honestly believe, guys, that this is the best way to do it. If we are in budget deficit, we are vulnerable, and I don't want to see that happen to us again. We want to borrow a limited amount of money for infrastructure investment in housing and other transport infrastructure things. We do think there has to be limited spending cuts in some government areas.
I'm afraid I'm cutting you now. Okay.
I'm going to quote Oxfam. The austerity programmes that bear a striking resemblance to the ruinous structural adjustment policies imposed on Latin America, Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa in the 80s and 90s. The policies were a failure then, and they're a failure now. Absolutely ruinous. It's a medicine that seeks to, as they describe it, cure the disease by killing the patient. Point number one, austerity has failed. It failed and it's failing now. And that's why people who stand up against austerity are popular. As if there's something wrong with being popular amongst working class people. Popular for the right reasons. Sorry, I'll stop there then. Let's try to time myself. Point number two, this argument that we had to do something is an absolute con and a lie, and it's a cover for an ideologically driven attack on everything that the generations that ordinary people have fought for. And we don't want to be part of the generation that lets it sail down the river, the welfare state, the health service, the idea that we stand up with one another, that disabled people are a value to society, that pensioners have got something to live for and should have a quality of life. There was an opportunity, and we did have to do something when the bank failed. We had to restructure the whole banking system. We had to curb the financial gambling, but you didn't do that. Instead, an opportunity was sought to take the opportunity of austerity. So this idea that we had to do something really doesn't wash it. And that's why those of us who are anti-austerity are very popular, to greater or lesser degrees, I would say, in terms of it, because people are living with the daily reality of it. I'm standing as a Tusk candidate because I am absolutely...
You're not popular with me anymore, can you pass it on?
No cuts at all in any circumstance.
We've lived through a global capitalist crisis and the ruling class has passed it off as a debt crisis. I think it's pretty telling that at least the Tories feel they need to hide the cuts from us, because last time round they were pretty blatant about it and people felt that we needed to all buckle in, but I think that there is a tide turning against austerity. But I think that all the mainstream parties are committed to balancing the books as according to the European Union, which means we have to be cutting our deficit to 60% of GDP, which all the parties are committed to, all the major parties are committed to, and until we win that argument on the left, we're never going to get anywhere with challenging the European Union and challenging austerity.
I think we've got on some
Yes,
of the candidates
so.
up here. Actually, a chair. Is that a chair?
This is... Thank you. You're okay. Thank you very much, George.
I think
Our debt is long-term and British owned. It's not really in the interest of all these big British insurance companies to pull the rug from under our feet. As you all will be aware, the bank's kind of collapse was due to light touch regulation. That was the big failure. Nobody else would have bought the sort of debt that these people who have paid fortunes to run banks, nobody else would have said, I'm going to take those bad mortgages on, just pass them over to me, I'll pay a lot of money for them. So we're in a pretty ridiculous situation, and really orthodox economics is pretty ridiculous. I think the IFS probably goes down the orthodox economics route, and I think all the major parties go down the orthodox economics route. We need to give poor people money, they spend it. They need to spend it. And then the money will circulate in the economy. We need to internationally tackle the power of international companies. We need to get together internationally to deal with the sort of power some of these companies have and hide money all over the place. I expect they said to Franklin D. Roosevelt, you know, Franklin, this won't work, this scheme of yours that you're going to plan to put people to work in the States, and you know, oh no, just let them starve and we'll pay off the debt and make our way out of this. There's a kind of deficit fetish that I think we need to avoid.
Okay. The next question is actually another three-parter. It's from the Trades Council. Could you indicate the position of your party in relation to the following important workplace issues? Zero-hour contracts, the need for an adequately resourced health and safety executive, and what is your party position on employment tribunal fees?
Could you please repeat the one about the second one?
The need for an adequately resourced health and safety executive. I'll pass it up here. You want to go with that?
Do we have a question from the floor?
It will be after this.
Thanks. Zero contracts, I think I've spelled it already, that we are making that one of the central parts of our campaign in this election, and before the election, and after the election. Because on the May the 8th, for working class people, life will continue fundamentally like it was on May the 7th. And we need to organise to change that. The reality includes zero-hour contracts. We want to scrap them, we want to abolish them. We want guaranteed jobs with secure hours in advance, whether it's part-time or full-time. And we don't accept all this talk about exploitative zero contracts, because frankly for us, every single one of them is exploitative. On employment tribunal fees, I know this firsthand as a union convener representing people, it's an abomination. It prices workers out of justice, any semblance of it, to be more exact, because tribunals are not exactly very pro-worker on balance. But there's even less chance now when a minimum of £1,200 is required of a worker to even get heard on a very basic case through tribunals. Now, Labour has skirted around this with a comment about how they will reform the employment tribunal fees system. They haven't said they'll abolish it, that I've seen in writing. I think they should be abolished, and then instead there should be some form of elected tribunals, not just stuffed with, you know, people remote from the shop floor representing people. Health and Safety Executive should be vastly expanded, and also I believe that health and safety in the workplace should be under workers' control through elected health and safety representatives like shop stewards, so as to maintain the health of working people.
Labour's position is perfectly clear. We are opposed to exploitative zero-hours contracts. The question of why don't we abolish all of them is just that there's a bit of nitpicking going on about what happens if you have somebody who lectures at a university who's a lawyer, who's a full-time job, and he just comes in every now and again, how do you pay him, etc, etc. The gist of our policy is quite clear. Anything that's exploitative, we will abolish. Labour's absolutely clear on that. I mean, I used to chair the Scottish Affairs Select Committee. We've been having hearings on that, trying to identify ways in which, again, not only RMT on the railways, but the safety staff are working on RMT contracts. I was trying, as some of you will be aware, to get Mike Ashley in front of us as a committee to look at Sports Direct, zero-hours contracts. So I want to pursue that. That's one of the reasons why I want to get re-elected, in order that I can continue to pursue these issues. The Health and Safety Executive, clearly the cuts that the Tories made in the number of inspectors were deliberately designed in order, as they would say, to lift the burdens on business. But the reality is it's allowed Tory employers to get away with allowing standards to slip. And particularly when you have a situation where workers are on zero-hours contracts, they're much less likely then to complain. And in those circumstances, in things like the building industry, you end up in positions where people are prepared to undertake work in unsafe conditions, afraid to complain, with the result that you then get casualties flowing from that. In terms of tribunal fees, my understanding is that Labour's policy is that we will reverse the Tory cuts in the system in order that access to tribunals becomes much more readily available than it has been up to now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the Health and Safety Executive. And I think that the cuts to the Health and Safety Executive were directly linked to the changes in health and safety law and the removal of liability claims. And I take the approach that there's no such thing as a workplace accident, because an accident waiting to happen is no accident. And I think there is a direct correlation between the changes to the health and safety laws and the cuts that they're making to the Health and Safety Executive. And I take the approach that the health and safety changes that the Tories introduced should be reversed, and we should go back to the situation as was. In terms of zero-hour contracts, I found myself in selection meetings actually arguing with people, because I would take the approach that some others have taken that there shouldn't be any zero-hours contracts, but there are students out there who would tell you that there are some benefits, and so it goes back to the point that Ian made about exploitative zero-hour contracts and making sure that we eliminate them. And in terms of tribunal fees, well, that's in court, I understand, and some of the trade unions have had leave to take that further in the legal process. But I do not support tribunal fees. I think that it's a way of trying to deny workers justice from the weakest employment law and workers' protections laws that we have in the Western world.
Okay, can you give it to Josh, please? Thank you.
On zero-hour contracts, actually, I did use them myself when I came to this country in 2004. Before my studies started, I actually was working in a bar, and I was working on a part-time basis. And as work on a part-time basis, we didn't call it zero-hour contracts at the time. the term was part-time basis, but not now, of course, that the Conservative-led government has created so many jobs. The alliance of the left has introduced new terms to the lexicon about jobs, and the term zero-hour contracts is more popular. But at my time, part-time job, it was perfectly fine for me. And, you know, as someone who is a conservative, I believe in individual freedom. I believe that each individual makes the best decision for themselves. I think that we would not ban zero-hour contracts. However, what this conservative-led government has done, we actually took action about the exclusivity of the zero-hour contract, because that was unfair. That is the part that we took action about. This is the part that was actually leading to distortion in the market, and that was something that we had to take decisive action against, and we did take action against that. But I'm actually very worried about all these people employed by Labour and the SNP, because if we ban zero-hour contracts, many people employed by many Labour MPs will be found out of jobs. So this is why I don't want to worry about that.
George, we'll see if Gary shares your concerns. Thank you.
Well, as George said, Liberal Democrat Minister, Business Minister Vince Cable banned the exclusivity agreement that was in some zero-hours contracts, so nobody can be tied to one zero-hour contract. And I share a bit with George. I used to work as a social care worker in an unnamed Labour council, Ian, on a zero-hours contract. I've got friends that work on zero contracts. Some people, I think we did an assessment of it, and it came out 32% of people or something on them valued the flexibility offered them. I also have worked self-employed in the past. There is an issue about how you get the hard-fought rights of employers and how you then give that to people who work flexibly in either self-employment or zero-hours contracts. I think that has to happen some way, but I think that a ban, I don't think a ban will happen despite protestations of Ian and his Labour partners, and I don't think it would be entirely helpful if it did have an outright ban, but I think the reliance of big companies on zero contracts is wrong and it should come to an end. Health and Safety Executive, the Coalition Government in 2012 reduced the requirement for Health and Safety Executive to carry out inspections on low-risk businesses. At the time, business communities reflected to the government that they welcomed that because it meant that they were getting less inspections and things like that. On balance, it does seem to have also been a bit detrimental in the sense that it didn't allow low-risk businesses to flag up issues which may become high-risk in the future. So I think it's definitely one to be reviewed. On the issue of employment fees, we've said that that was definitely a mistake. Vince Cable said quite openly that that needs to be ended. That it's deterring people and it should be ended.
There's 455,000 people in Scotland, according to the STUC, that want full-time work but can't get it. So don't tell me about flexibility. It's almost as if when you listen to some out-of-touch politicians that people never work flexibly until now. There has always been a capacity for flexible working, for part-time, for short-term work. We are talking about the rife scandal where you get a contract where the employer does not guarantee you a thing. The idea that anyone can budget, can plan, can have a reasonable standard of life with no guarantee what your pay is going to be. People have said to me in the stalls, the rent's still got to be paid, the bills have still got to be paid. This is what we're talking about. So we are talking for the ending of the 0 hours, and it's very popular, and actually it's bringing more. The scale of it is coming to the fore, and it's because of the action and the voice and the concerns of ordinary people. So I really dismiss that whole argument about flexibility only being brought through 0 hours contracts. I actually raised a motion at our union branch, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when I first heard about it, 0 hours contracts. I couldn't believe it. I sort of laughed when I'm sorry I did. It just was incredible. And so also in the health and safety, anything that can strengthen the ability of people that work to make workplace safe and not harmful to them. For goodness sake, it's 2015, it's a disgrace. We've even got to do that.
Yeah, we can. Thank you. You helped me there. I spent 4 years at university. I never met anyone that enjoyed working on a 0 hours contract or found it useful. What I found is that you end up not knowing if you get called into work, you don't know how long you're going to be there, you can't ask for time off for your exams, and you don't know how much you're going to earn, you can't plan your social life, let alone your studying. And I think that with the, it's the tip of the iceberg really, 0 hours contracts, because these employers are just going to bring in 1 hour contracts and 2 hour contracts if you just ban them. And there are 7 million workers across Britain who are working part-time because they can't find full-time work. We should be guaranteeing them proper hours. It's mostly women and it's mostly young people. With the health and safety legislation, it's shocking the cuts and the fact that the health and safety executive has now got to look to big business. Look for funding and advice on its implementation of health and safety. It should be properly funded, and also I think health and safety reps are really important in the workplace, because in my work I know very much that, like, although my employer is keen to press the health and safety issues very much, if it goes wrong it's your fault and it'll be, so you don't complain about it. Yeah, so yeah.
Well, I speak as a former health and safety rep and a former workplace trade union rep. The health and safety one is crucial. We have far too many industrial accidents in Scotland, far too many. Some of them extremely damaging and serious accidents. It's essential that workers feel secure, that health and safety is taken seriously, and that they can complain without fear, and that all the appropriate supports are in place. So that's a real priority, I think, that health and safety is taken seriously and there aren't obstacles put in people's way. Similarly with tribunals, you shouldn't be priced out of your hearing. That's justice, surely. You just shouldn't be priced out of your hearing, so there shouldn't be a barrier there. The 0 hours contracts that we have now simply seem to be exploitative. I suppose you could say that I'm a supply teacher, so if you call that a 0 hours contract, you know, then if teachers are off sick or something, then you need somebody to come in and take the class. Actually, that's being paid at a lower rate now. I would say that anywhere there is a necessity, like a standby person, as you know, I have been, a standby person should be paid at a higher rate, I think. And I think that would put an end to the exploitation of the 0 hours contracts.
Okay, Moira, I'm putting you in standby. I'm going to take some questions.